Now, leaders of the US, Japan, India and Australia all vowing to pursue and protect a free and open Indo-Pacific. That phrase we keep hearing. While there was no mention of China in their public remarks, concerns about Beijing clearly helped shape those measures. And this comes as China continues to dial up its economic and military presence in the region and grows increasingly assertive on matters like the South China Sea. Now, Beijing has always been critical of the Quad, but war of words aside, it's tough to predict how China will respond to the group. Now, CNBC has tried applying game theory to come up with the answer. Ted Kemp, editor of CNBC.com, is here to tell us more. Ted, what did the game theory show us about the Quad and China?
Yeah, so Rosanna, as you mentioned, we turned to a highly regarded game theory model to predict the future of the Quad. And a lot came out of the model, but if there was a big headline, it was the prediction that China will experience some degree of factionalism internally around the best way to deal with the Quad. The model indicates that some elements of the leadership in Beijing, and it's the most outward-facing ones for what it's worth, will begin to favor a more conciliatory approach to the Quad, according to this game theory output. And among those individuals are parts of the foreign policy leadership and parts of the Chinese military. However, and this is important, by the way, the model does not show these more, let's call them dovish players prevailing over the hawks who are at the top of the Politburo.
Very interesting. Ted, good morning. Tanveer here. I understand that the game theory's prediction on China was pretty contentious. What did experts disagree with? What was the feedback like?
Yeah, well, Tanveer, as you know, the idea of there being factions within the leadership in Beijing, that whole idea is very much counter to everything we think we know about governance in China. So there was naturally a bit of contention around that prediction. It continues to be. But the model, which historically has a 90% accuracy rate, says that it's there.
90% accuracy, can't look past that. But when we talk about China's stance, Ted, two other players obviously come to mind, Russia and Taiwan. Beijing has that sort of loose alliance with Moscow, I think it's fair to say, and has always seen Taiwan, of course, as part of China. So how did those two economies factor in?
You just put it exactly right, Rosanna. It is seen as a sort of loose alliance between Russia and China. Russia is interesting because it's aligned with China on many issues, and so it has, well, it just happens to have its own cards that it can play in terms of, bringing negative pressure on the Quad. But the model, what it indicated specifically about Russia, is that it too will have people at the top who will want a more friendly stance taken toward the Quad. The game theory model predicted that they would not prevail over Russia's hawks, its own hawks. But as with China, there's this tempering influence that the model identified. And then you mentioned Taiwan as well. Many policy experts and global leaders around the world consider the Taiwan issue is the single most worrying in the Asia-Pacific region. You have this real fear out there in some quarters of a conflict that could happen there, and where you have a situation of a self-ruling democracy that's basically claimed lock, stock, and barrel by China. The model indicated that there would be some division again within the ruling party in Taiwan, that they start actually more hawkish and more aggressive toward China in their position than the Quad is. But they slowly temper back and kind of come more in line with the Quad. So it pointed to a divergence of opinion in all of these countries.
Yeah, and many equations to contend with. Circling back to the game theory, Ted, were there any issues that you faced when using it to predict the future of the Quad? I mean, are there any limitations of applying science to strategy, so to speak?
Yeah, there certainly are. Game theory, and this is how I put it in the article that I put together, it's not magic. It has limitations. It operates on models, and the very definition of that word model means that you can't include everything, right? There's always going to be things that arise that you couldn't have accounted for. And so, like, for example, none of us, the game theory model couldn't have possibly foreseen Paris's anger toward Great Britain and the United States over the submarine deal. It didn't predict it because it just wasn't capable of doing it. So there are limitations there. And there are other people who have said, Beijing's leadership is sort of a black box. So it's very difficult to model those individuals, and that's what the game theory does. It models individual human beings because you can't get a very good, look at those individuals within China in particular.